You know, if it's not about sports, I find it very hard to concentrate.
Real quick, guys, before I get started, I just wanted to do a shameless plug. I have a second channel where I do commentary videos, drama slop, but it's fun and I like it and I need more subscribers on it, so please check it out and subscribe to it. Thank you. I'll leave a link for it in the description, but without further ado, let's get into the video. Growing up, the Arena Football League was one of my favorite things to watch. Something about football indoors in a smaller than normal space was so much fun to me. As a kid, me and my friends tried to replicate it in the hallway of my childhood home, and it ended with one of my friends tackling me through a door. My parents were not happy, to say the least. One thing I remember is that the AFL had such cool team names. The New Orleans Voodoo, the San Jose Sabercats, and even the team in my home state, the Utah Blaze. I even attended a few Blaze games as a kid. They had a former Dolphins quarterback starting for them named Tommy Grady. Even to this day, I remember researching his stats and wanting a Utah Blaze Tommy Grady jersey. I've thought about doing this video for a long time because I find the Arena Football League to be such an interesting topic, especially because it lasted for so long. Typically, professional football leagues that are not named the NFL tend to flame out pretty quick. But not the Arena Football League. It stuck around for 32 years and only recently ceased operations in 2019. So without further yapping from me, let's just get into it. To explain the lore a bit better, I need to introduce you to the inventor of Arena Football and the founder of the Arena Football League, a gentleman by the name of Jim Foster. Born in Iowa City, Iowa, Foster would go on to graduate from the University of Iowa in 1972. He founded a semi-pro football team in 1974 called the Newton Nighthawks, based in Newton, Iowa, and the team had the same color scheme as the Iowa Hawkeyes. They played in the Northern States Pro Football League, and the team won the league championship in 1975. Foster would go on to be hired to help other struggling semi-pro teams, and in 1975, finally got his big break when the NFL hired him to become their promotions manager for NFL-owned properties. 2 years later, in 1981, while Foster was at an indoor soccer game at Madison Square Garden, he had an idea. And that idea was indoor football, played on a smaller playing surface. He jotted his idea down on an envelope and showed it to some friends at the NFL offices. He received praise for his idea, and after solidifying the rules and an actionable business plan, he pitched it to NBC, who arranged for a test game. But unfortunately, the test game would have to wait. A new football league was launched the following year in 1982 called the USFL, and Foster was offered a position with the new startup league, which he accepted. So he put his plans for arena football on hold. He eventually became vice president of the USFL's Chicago Blitz, but he did not give up on his dream of arena football. He arranged for a test game to take place in 1986 and recruited two teams made up of players from local colleges, and named the two teams the Chicago Politicians and the Rockford Metros, and the game was held at the Rockford Metro Center in Rockford, Illinois. Interest in the new type of football turned out to be pretty high, so much so that a second test game was planned, and later was played on February 27, 1987 at the Rosemont Horizon in Chicago, and ESPN even filmed it and aired the highlights on SportsCenter. And this game was successful too, and so Foster officially got to work conceptualizing and planning. The USFL had gone defunct a couple of years prior, and so Foster had time on his hands to plan and promote arena football. He launched the Arena Football League in 1987 with 4 teams: the Pittsburgh Gladiators, the Denver Dynamite, the Washington Commandos, and the Chicago Bruisers. The first official game in Arena Football League history was played on June 19, 1987 between the Gladiators and the Commandos at Pittsburgh Civic Arena, and 12,000 fans showed up to watch history being made. The league made the decision to not televise the game so that any failures or follies could not be easily scrutinized or critiqued. The first ever televised game, however, would occur the next day between the Dynamite and the Bruisers and was held at Rosemont Horizon, and that game aired on ESPN. Fun little fact, Lee Corso actually called this game. ESPN was a network that by this point was quickly becoming a powerhouse in sports media. The broadcast on ESPN did show a brief clip of the game the previous night between the Gladiators and Commandos too. The 1987 AFL season consisted of 6 games, and the top 2 teams in the standings played in Arena Bowl 1. It turned out to be the Pittsburgh Gladiators and the Denver Dynamite, who met on August 1st, 1987 at Pittsburgh Civic Arena. Denver won the first ever Arena Bowl by a score of 45-16. Almost 2 months later, Jim Foster filed a patent application which covered the concept of arena football and the rules of the game. Foster's patent was approved in 1990 and lasted until 2007. The league itself continued to operate in relative obscurity, mostly due to the fact that games that aired on ESPN were tape delayed and not shown until well after midnight, and also edited down to fit the time slot. But the league did make headlines on July 23, 1989, when Pittsburgh Gladiators coach Joe Herring punched Jim Foster. The Gladiators were playing the Chicago Bruisers in Sacramento as part of the AFL's Barnstorming America tour. Barnstorming, for those unaware, is essentially when a team will travel around to various different venues to play. A good example would be the Harlem Globetrotters. Anyhow, an altercation on the field led to Foster walking onto the field to try and break it up, and that's when Herring punched him. The incident was covered by many different media outlets. Herring received a suspension without pay. One of the most successful teams in AFL history was the Detroit Drive, although they didn't last for very long. They're known for being the team that disgraced NFL quarterback Art Schlichter played for, and I actually did a video on him. They're also known for playing in the Arena Bowl every year of their existence, which was only 1988 through 1993. They regularly played in front of a sold-out crowd at Joe Louis Arena. Their existence came to an end when the owner of the team, Mike Ilitch, who also owned the pizza chain known as Little Caesars, sold the team in 1993 and they were renamed the Massachusetts Marauders. But the Drive weren't the only team considered to be a dynasty by AFL historians. Others included the Tampa Bay Storm, the Orlando Predators, the Arizona Rattlers, and the San Jose SaberCats. Between those four teams, they combined for 14 championships between 1994 and 2016 and appeared in all Arena Bowls in that time span, except for 2. The AFL introduced an All-Star game in 1993, and the first one was played in Des Moines, Iowa, home of the Iowa Barnstormers, which, despite their name, did not in fact barnstorm. The National Conference defeated the American Conference 64-40. The AFL became known for high-scoring games due to the shortened field. Scores more often resembled basketball scores rather than football scores. It also became known for constantly expanding and teams relocating, so much so in fact that there was never 2 consecutive seasons where the league had the exact same lineup of cities and teams. Some of the cooler team names were the New Orleans Voodoo, clad in purple and incorporating orange into their color scheme, with the logo being a skull and crossbones with the skull wearing a top hat. The aforementioned San Jose SaberCats had a cool mascot too, a fierce prehistoric feline that oddly no other professional team in any sport that I can think of uses as a mascot. Correct me if I'm wrong. Some of the more iconic team names included the Arizona Rattlers, named after the desert snakes that inhabit the state of Arizona. My favorite, of course, was the Utah Blaze, because I have lived in Utah basically my whole life. Their color scheme was orange and black with a flame on their helmet. The Nashville Cats were a team that played from 1997 until 2001, and again from 2005 until 2007. And were owned at one time by Bud Adams, who once owned the Tennessee Titans. One of the more interesting team names was the Los Angeles Kiss, who were owned by the lead singer of the rock band Kiss, which explains the name. The Kiss only played for 3 seasons from 2014 until 2016, and were not very successful, never having a winning season once, and only making the playoffs in 1 season, that being 2016. They lost that one playoff game. Now that we've gone over some of the teams, let's get back to the history of the league. The league began to gain more notoriety in the 1990s and had a small following during that time. In 1995, the Iowa Barnstormers signed future NFL Hall of Famer Kurt Warner. Warner had been cut by the Packers and no other NFL teams were willing to give him a chance, and so he signed with the Barnstormers, hoping to revive his career. And he did just that, being named to the All-Arena First Team in 1996 and 1997, and today is considered one of the greatest AFL players of all time. In fact, the league would use his name when they released their first video game called Kurt Warner's Arena Football Unleashed in 2000. Warner also helped legitimize the league and bring it more exposure. As the 90s ended and the 2000s officially began, the Arena Football League introduced a minor league called AF2. The new millennium also brought tons of expansion for the AFL, introducing such teams as the Dallas Desperados, the Colorado Crush, the New York Dragons, the Los Angeles Avengers, the Philadelphia Soul, and the Chicago Rush. Yes, it truly was a good time for Arena Football League fans. The late 90s and early 2000s were the heyday, but the good times would not last forever. In July of 2008, just days before Arena Bowl XXII, the AFL's long-serving commissioner David Baker announced his retirement. This would be just the first of many dominoes to fall. In October of that same year, New Orleans Voodoo owner Tom Benson announced the team would be shutting down operations, marking the end of one of the coolest and most swag franchises in AFL history. Voodoo players were eventually put into a dispersal draft, but the dispersal draft was postponed multiple times, and eventually it was postponed indefinitely. Rumors began to circulate that the AFL would soon shut down operations due to financial issues. On top of that, it was announced that the Players Union had agreed to cut the salary cap for the 2009 season to keep the league afloat. The AF2 minor league celebrated its 10th anniversary in 2009, but there wasn't much to celebrate for its parent league. The AFL announced it would cancel the 2009 season to, quote, create a long-term plan to improve its economic model, unquote. The man appointed to accomplish this task was the owner of the Columbus Destroyers, Jim Renacci, and interim commissioner Ed Policy, although Policy would soon resign. 2 weeks after Policy's resignation, the Los Angeles Avengers announced they were ceasing operations. And a month after that, more bad news was on the way for anyone still holding out hope that the AFL was salvageable in its current state, as it was announced that the AFL had missed the deadline to ratify a new collective bargaining agreement. And also, the AFL announced they were eliminating health insurance for players. According to the Sports Business Journal, by the summer of 2009, the AFL owed around $14 million to various creditors and was considering filing Chapter 11 bankruptcy, although they ended up filing Chapter 7 bankruptcy instead. The AFL's minor league, AF2, also shut down operations in 2009. However, the owners of some teams, such as the Arizona Rattlers and Orlando Predators, agreed to form a new entity called the Arena Football League, which for legal reasons was completely separate but featured many of the same teams. The new league purchased the assets and trademarks of the previous AFL on December 7, 2009, with the exception of the Dallas Desperados. But the league did announce a franchise in Dallas called the Vigilantes and one in Jacksonville, Florida called the Jacksonville Sharks. The league also added a new team in Pittsburgh called the Pittsburgh Power, owned partially by former Steelers wide receiver Lynn Swann. In 2012, the AFL celebrated its 25th anniversary. The 25th season officially began on March 9, 2012. The Dallas Vigilantes folded that year with no real explanation as to why. However, the AFL got a bit of a financial windfall in the form of a sponsor, and that sponsor was Net10 Wireless. On December 12, 2012, the AFL was renamed the Net10 Wireless AFL. The sponsorship would last for 2 seasons until 2014. In 2013, the AFL added 2 expansion teams, the Los Angeles Kiss, owned by Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley, 2 members of the rock band Kiss, and the Portland Thunder. Another rock star would be granted an AFL team in 2014, when the Las Vegas Outlaws joined the league, owned by Motley Crue frontman Vince Neil. However, despite what seemed like an upward trajectory for the AFL during this time wasn't without its struggles. The Iowa Barnstormers, one of the longest tenured teams in the AFL, left to join the Indoor Football League, and the Pittsburgh Power ceased operations in 2014. The fallout of this was poor attendance throughout the league, which caused more financial woes. In August of 2015, both the New Orleans Voodoo and the Las Vegas Outlaws shut down operations. The Spokane Shock would ditch the AFL to join the IFL, marking the 5th time the AFL lost a team to the IFL. In November of 2015, the San Jose SaberCats shut down operations, which left the AFL with just 8 teams for the upcoming 2016 season. In early January of 2016, the AFL took over operations and control of the Portland Thunder in order to provide financial support to the failing franchise. The following month, in February, the AFL announced the team would start from scratch and no longer be called the Thunder. The reason for that is because the trademark still belonged to the former owner, so the Thunder became the Portland Still as the league continued to operate it. The 2016 schedule featured 8 teams playing 16 games over a span of 18 weeks, with 2 bye weeks each. One of those bye weeks was Independence Day weekend, in which the entire league took off and no games occurred. All teams qualified for the postseason, with the regular season's only function being to establish seeding. Following the 2016 season, 2 teams left the AFL to join the National Arena League, those being the Orlando Predators and the Jacksonville Sharks. The Arizona Rattlers were the next to jump ship as they left for the IFL, and the Los Angeles Kiss and Portland Steel both folded, shutting down operations entirely. But a small glimmer of hope appeared for the AFL as a new team joined as an expansion franchise, the Washington Valor, who played at the Verizon Center in Washington, D.C. In October, the AFL held a teleconference meeting with the 5 remaining team owners discussing the long-term viability of the AFL, with the owners and the league deciding the AFL would continue in the short term. A second franchise was given to the Washington Valor owner Ted Leonis, and it was based in Baltimore and called the Baltimore Brigade. The week of Arena Bowl XXX, the AFL announced an expansion franchise for Albany, New York called the Albany Empire. It gave a slight glimmer of hope to the AFL, but as was the trend for the AFL by this point, every slight glimmer of hope was soon eclipsed by a dark cloud. In November of 2017, the Cleveland Gladiators announced they would take a 2-year leave of absence due to the fact that the arena they played in was undergoing construction, which was planned for the NBA offseason so that the Cleveland Cavaliers wouldn't be disturbed. The project was set to take place over 2 NBA off-seasons, thus the 2-year leave of absence for the Gladiators. One of the AFL's most successful franchises, and the last remaining original franchise, suspended operations due to financial woes. That franchise was the Tampa Bay Storm, formerly known as the Pittsburgh Gladiators, who played in the first ever Arena Bowl in 1987 against the Denver Dynamite. The Gladiators/Storm won a total of 5 Arena Bowls, and played in the most recent Arena Bowl up to that point, Arena Bowl XXX, which they lost to the Philadelphia Soul. The Gladiators/Storm franchise played in 10 Arena Bowls as well. They were truly a titan of the AFL, one of the forefathers of the league. The 2018 season schedule was released with only 4 teams left in the league. Things were not looking very good for the AFL. They were struggling financially, teams were folding left and right, and other arena leagues were poaching teams like crazy. The league began in 1987 with 4 teams, and now, 31 years in, they were right back at 4. But on the bright side, at least for players, the brand new collective bargaining agreement that had been agreed upon in 2018 brought back health insurance for players. The league moved from its headquarters in Las Vegas to Philadelphia due to Ron Jaworski, the owner of the Philadelphia Soul, the defending Arena Bowl champions, taking over as chairman of the AFL. In January of 2019, the AFL granted a second franchise to the owners of the Albany Empire that would play in Atlantic City, New Jersey, and would be called the Atlantic City Blackjacks. The Columbus Destroyers rejoined the league in February, bringing the league total to 6 teams. The league got a boost financially when ESPN paid for the rights to broadcast AFL games on ESPN3, with the exception of the Arena Bowl, which would be broadcast on ESPN2. And as it turned out, that year's Arena Bowl would be the very last one to take place. The Albany Empire defeated the Philadelphia Soul 45-27, with former Utah Blaze quarterback Tommy Grady winning Arena Bowl MVP for the Empire. Sometimes things die with a whimper, sometimes with a slow well, and other times it just ends abruptly. The AFL ended abruptly. Commissioner Randall Bowe announced after the 2019 season that all 6 teams would be shutting down. A lawsuit had been filed by the AFL's former workers' compensation insurance provider. On November 27, 2019, Commissioner Bowe announced on Twitter that the AFL filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy and had fully ceased operations. A giant mess had finally just ended. An old miserable horse put out of her misery. A giant headache gone. It's really sad that a league that had already survived bankruptcy and had existed since 1987 finally died, but I suppose there was really no salvaging it. Truly no path forward with how bad things had gotten. The league sort of got reborn this year, and I'll tell you what I mean. A new ownership group had purchased the league's trademarks, logos, teams, and social media accounts. The league operated as a single entity in 2024, with the ownership group, G6 Sports Group, based in Toronto, Canada, controlling all the franchises, similar to how Major League Soccer operates. But in 2025, the individuals involved with the various teams created a new separate league called the Arena Football One. The trademark still resided with the G6 Sports Group, so new team names and logos and color schemes were created. The regular season for this AF1 league began on March 8, 2025, just 2 months ago. The Southwest Kansas Storm defeated the Nashville Cats to open the season. The league commissioner is former Rams and Titans coach Jeff Fisher. The AF1 offers a base salary of $400 per game, roughly translating to a measly sum of $1,600 per month within a 12-game season. This puts players at making just above minimum wage and far below minimum wage in some states. I don't mean to be a pessimist, but I don't really see how this spiritual successor to the AFL is going to survive. I guess we'll wait and see, but I'd bet my last dollar it folds before the 2025 season even ends. So there you have it, a fun league that was fun while it lasted, but due to mismanagement and low interest, ultimately it failed. Will you guys be watching any AF1 games this year? Will you be supporting your local team? Let me know in the comments. As always, thank you for watching. Leave a like if you liked this video, leave a dislike if you hated it, but either way, comment for the algorithm. Peace out.
I can never ever find the right words, and there's no way this is real life. There's no telling you're the right girl, so I can only say that it feels right. It feels right, it feels right. Yeah, I can only say that it feels right. It feels right, it feels right. Yeah, I can only say that it feels right.